While I continued serving my country in the Middle East during the ongoing crisis, Michelle and Mark were discovering that trying to deceive a military intelligence officer had been the worst decision of their lives. What they didn't yet realize was that the worst was still to come. 3 months later, my deployment ended successfully, and I finally returned to the United States. Yet as I stepped off the plane, I knew the real battle was only beginning. This time, however, I would be fighting on familiar ground, with every advantage on my side. Samuel was waiting for me at San Diego Airport, holding a thick folder filled with updates. "Alex, you need to know that everything changed while you were away," he said. On the drive to my hotel, he explained that Michelle and Mark had been formally indicted on 15 criminal charges, including wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The case had escalated into a large-scale federal investigation, uncovering an entire network. Lena had traced connections to other similar scams in Nevada and Arizona. Mark wasn't just an amateur scammer, Samuel explained. He built a sophisticated system for targeting deployed military personnel through their spouses. You weren't his first victim. You were just part of a bigger pattern. I sat in silence, absorbing the reality. My case wasn't personal after all. It was colder, more calculated. I had simply been another name on their list. The next day, I met Lena Petrova in person at her office in La Jolla. She was even more striking in reality than over our encrypted video calls. Her sharp green eyes radiated focus and purpose, the look of someone who lived to untangle complex webs of deception. She greeted me with a firm handshake. "Captain Harding, it's an honor to finally meet you in person. I hope you're ready for some revelations." Her presentation was meticulous. She laid out charts, timelines, and forensic evidence that mapped Mark's entire operation. His method was precise. Identify high-ranking married military personnel on long deployments, approach their wives through professional or social networks, offer free financial consulting, and gradually lure them into both romantic and financial dependency. Then, when the husband was thousands of miles away in a conflict zone, with limited communication and maximum vulnerability, Mark would strike. The FBI had confirmed at least 8 victims over 5 years, with an estimated $2.3 million stolen. "Your wife wasn't the first Michelle in his life," Lena said with a bitter smile. He had a type: women married to military men, with access to joint accounts, willing to trade loyalty for promises of easy wealth. In the weeks that followed, I approached the legal proceedings as I would a military campaign, with precision, patience, and discipline. Michelle cycled through desperate defenses, claiming neglect as a military spouse, portraying herself as emotionally manipulated, even suggesting that she had no idea where the money was going. But none of it held up. The trial became a theater of mutual destruction. The two people who had once conspired together now tore each other apart in public. Michelle accused Mark of seducing and coercing her. Mark insisted Michelle had been the true mastermind. But against Lena's forensic evidence, emails, encrypted chats, financial trails, and wiretap phone calls, their lies crumbled. On a cold November morning, the verdict came down. Michelle, 8 years in federal prison and full restitution. Mark, 12 years in prison, restitution to all victims, and the forfeiture of all assets. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt a surprising sense of closure. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't vengeance. It was the quiet satisfaction of seeing justice work exactly as it should. The real victory, however, came in the months that followed. Lena and I decided to channel our skills into something larger than ourselves. Together, we founded Petrova Harding Security Consulting, combining my military intelligence background with her expertise in financial forensics. Our mission: to protect military families from fraud. Our first case was Sarah Martinez, the wife of a deployed major in Afghanistan. She had been approached by a consultant who suspiciously knew personal details about her husband's career. We intercepted and dismantled the scheme before any damage was done. Within our first year, we had prevented more than 15 fraud attempts, recovered over $800,000 for victims, and developed security protocols later adopted by the Department of Defense itself. Lena and I grew closer as we worked side by side. By the following spring, we were married in a simple ceremony on Coronado Beach. Samuel stood proudly as my best man. For our honeymoon, we attended a cybersecurity conference in Austin, where we presented our military family protection model to an audience of global experts. 5 years later, I received a letter from prison. It was from Michelle. She had served 6 years of her sentence and was now free. Her words were full of regret and apologies, pleading for forgiveness. I chose not to respond, not out of bitterness, but because I had learned something essential. The best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building a better life than they ever imagined for you. Mark remains behind bars. Michelle lives quietly in Nevada, working as a supermarket, her reputation permanently shattered. As for me, I built a company that shields families from the pain I endured. I married an extraordinary woman, and I turned my greatest betrayal into my greatest purpose. The real victory wasn't seeing them punished. It was choosing to rise above, to protect instead of destroy, and to prove that integrity, honor, and resilience are worth more than any money that could ever be stolen. I clicked on the old message, more out of instinct than expectation. It felt strange to see Harrison's name again. He'd been the reason I got into systems architecture in the first place, a brilliant but eccentric professor who had always warned me about the games corporations play with ownership. The email was short, direct, and urgent in a way I hadn't appreciated back then. Damon, make sure you keep personal copies of the patent drafts. The language in Pinnacle's legal filings suggests they're positioning to take full control of our distributed authentication protocol. You are the lead author, not just a contributor. Don't let them erase you. At the time, I'd brushed it off. I was 28, fresh in the industry, eager to please, and too trusting of the company that had just given me my big break. We were building something groundbreaking, an adaptive authentication layer for cloud infrastructures, and I thought loyalty would protect me. Now, staring at that email, nearly 7 years later, the pieces began to align in a way that made my stomach tighten. I opened the attached draft Harrison had sent. My name sat clearly at the top as primary inventor alongside his. But when I pulled up Pinnacle's official patent filings in the public database, my name was nowhere to be found. The patent, valued in the hundreds of millions given how widely the technology had since been adopted, was credited entirely to Blackwood et al. My contributions have been erased from history, rewritten in favor of executives who wouldn't know a line of code from coffee order. The termination suddenly made sense. This wasn't just downsizing. It was a cleanup operation. With me gone, there would be no inconvenient loose ends, no disgruntled architect pointing out the truth. I sat back on my couch, pizza forgotten, staring at the flickering light of my laptop screen. For the first time that day, anger began to replace the numbness. Not the explosive, table-flipping kind, but something colder, focused. I'd spent 11 years building their empire, brick by digital brick, and in return they had not only discarded me, but stolen the very foundation of my work. And then another thought surfaced. If Harrison had warned me back in 2018, had he been cut out too? Was he still alive? Still fighting? I took another swig of beer, grabbed a notebook from the coffee table, and wrote 2 words at the top of a blank page. Get it back. That night, while most of Silicon Valley slept, I started digging that I'd completely forgotten about this email back then. Dr. Harrison had reached out after hearing about some experimental work I'd been doing on distributed computing architecture. He'd insisted, almost demanded, that I file for intellectual property protection on a particular algorithm I designed for managing cloud-based data synchronization. Damon, the email read, "What you've created here isn't just clever coding. It's a fundamental breakthrough in how distributed systems communicate. File the paperwork. Trust me on this." Big companies have a way of forgetting where their best ideas actually came from. At the time, I thought he was being overly cautious, maybe even a little paranoid. Pinnacle Tech was my employer, and in my naive view, anything I created on their payroll belonged to them. Why rock the boat? But Dr. Harrison had been adamant. He even went so far as to connect me with a patent attorney Rebecca Martinez, who specialized in software patents and ran a boutique practice in downtown San Jose. It'll cost you about $18,000 all in, Rebecca had explained during our consultation. But if this algorithm is as revolutionary as your mentor believes, it's the best investment you'll ever make. $18,000. At the time, 2018, that was nearly 5 months of my salary. The number had made me swallow hard, but something in Harrison's tone, some urgency I couldn't quite name, pushed me to move forward. I drained my entire savings account and even took out a personal loan from my credit union to cover the fees. By mid-2019, the patent was official: system and method for autonomous data synchronization in distributed cloud environments. Patent number US 10,456,789, filed under my name alone. Damon Christopher Reyes, sole inventor. I remembered holding the final certificate in my hands, embossed with the USPTO seal, feeling a mixture of pride and disbelief. And then life moved on. Deadlines piled up. Quarterly reviews consumed my energy. New projects demanded my focus. The patent went into a forgotten folder on my personal laptop, collecting digital dust. Meanwhile, Pinnacle Tech continued building its empire. My algorithm wasn't just another optimization or clever workaround. It became the core engine driving the company's cloud services. Every major client, from Netflix to Airbnb to half the Fortune 500, relied on my system to keep their vast oceans of data synchronized across servers worldwide. And now, staring at the database entry on my laptop in 2025, I realized the truth. The patent was still active, still valid, with nearly 14 years left on its 20-year term. And Pinit processed over 2.1 billion transactions every single day and accounted for nearly 78% of Pinnacle Tech's entire revenue stream. And according to the United States Patent and Trademark Office, I owned it. Not Pinnacle, not some nebulous company IP pool. Me. The realization gnawed at me all night. By morning, I was sitting at a Pete's Coffee in downtown Mountain View, my laptop glowing in the corner booth. The air smelled of espresso and baked bread as I buried myself in patent law, licensing agreements, and precedent-setting court rulings. The more I read, the clearer the picture became. Pinnacle had been illegally using my invention for nearly 6 years. They'd assumed, wrongly, that because I was an employee, everything I created defaulted to company property. But the law was very specific. The BOL Act and multiple court cases since had drawn a bright line. Unless there was a work-for-hire clause or a patent assignment agreement signed at the time of invention, the inventor retained full rights. I opened the dusty PDF of my 2014 employment contract, one I'd tucked into my personal archives years ago. It contained the usual boilerplate: non-disclosure clauses, non-compete restrictions, intellectual property confidentiality. But there was nothing about patent assignment. Dr. Harrison had known exactly what he was warning me about. The implications staggered me. Every server farm Pinnacle ran, every global client relying on their cloud synchronization, every contract they'd signed with promises of proprietary technology, it all rested on ground they didn't legally own. I didn't hesitate any longer. I pulled up Rebecca Martinez's number, the patent attorney who had shepherded me through the grueling USPTO filing process back in 2018. Her office was tucked inside a modest building on West Santa Clara Street, the kind of unassuming place where scrappy inventors went when they couldn't afford the flashier firms with glass towers and valet parking. She answered on the second ring. Rebecca Martinez. "It's Damon," I said, my voice tight. There was a pause, and then recognition clicked immediately. "Damon Reyes. I was wondering when you'd call. I heard about your situation at Pinnacle." I frowned. "Already?" She gave a small laugh. "The valley isn't as big as it looks. When a potential patent dispute worth hundreds of millions is brewing, word travels faster than a tweet." "Rebecca," I said, leaning forward as though she could see my urgency through the phone, "I need to know my options. They fired me last week, but they're still running their entire infrastructure on my algorithm." Her reply was calm, measured, but carried a sharp edge. "Let me be very direct with you. You have them by the throat. Every single day, they use your patented technology without a license. They're committing willful infringement. That's not just damages, it's treble damages. We're talking astronomical numbers here. By the afternoon, I was sitting across from her in her cramped office, surrounded by shelves sagging with law books and patent diagrams. Her desk was cluttered but meticulously organized, with framed certificates lining the wall and a whiteboard covered in arrows and flowcharts. It smelled faintly of ink and paper, the air of a place where the next great lawsuit was already being drafted. For the first time since my termination, I no longer felt like the discarded employee of a tech giant. I felt like something far more dangerous. The rightful owner, that Ackley Tech, had been profiting from it every single day, without acknowledging me, without compensating me, without even remembering that the legal ownership didn't belong to them at all. The realization hit me like a jolt of electricity. I wasn't just a discarded employee. I wasn't powerless. I was the legal owner of the one thing Pinnacle Tech could not function without. For the first time since reading that termination email, I felt something other than shock and grief. I felt leverage. Rebecca Martinez was in her early 50s, sharp-eyed and calm in the way only someone who had spent decades in corporate law could be. She had once been a partner at a prestigious Silicon Valley firm, but she'd walked away from the endless billable hour quotas and suffocating partnership politics to build her own solo practice. Sitting across from her, I could see she hadn't lost a step. "Here's what I know," she said, swiveling her monitor so I could see the screen. A cascade of SEC filings filled the page. Pinnacle Tech has been in serious talks with Nexera Technologies for the past 6 months. The deal is valued at $485 million, with the transaction expected to close by mid-May. She tapped her pen against the filing. Nexera is another heavyweight, enterprise software client management systems. If the merger goes through, the combined company becomes a cloud computing powerhouse. Pinnacle's infrastructure paired with Nexera's software, investors will salivate. Her expression darkened. But here's the problem for them. Due diligence in a deal this size requires absolutely clean intellectual property. Nexera's lawyers will demand hard proof that Pinnacle owns every single line of technology they're buying. And when they discover that Pinnacle's core algorithm, the engine driving nearly 80% of their revenue, isn't actually theirs, she let the silence finish the sentence. I leaned back in the chair, heart thudding. So what are my options? Rebecca folded her arms. Several. We could send a cease and desist letter right now. That would force them to come to the table and negotiate a licensing agreement on your terms. Or we could demand immediate licensing fees retroactively, which would hit their books hard just as they're trying to look pristine for Nexera. And of course, there's always full litigation. With willful infringement this blatant, the damages could be astronomical. Her eyes narrowed. But Damon, timing is everything here. The question isn't just what you want to do, but when you want to do it. I thought about it for maybe 30 seconds. How long do they have before they need to hand over intellectual property documentation to Nexera? Based on typical merger timelines for a $500 million deal, she said, 4 to 6 weeks. Maximum. I smiled, the first real smile I'd allowed myself in months. Then we wait. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. Wait. Exactly, I said. Let them get deeper into this deal. Let them spend millions on lawyers, consultants, and PR campaigns. Let them start counting the money in their heads. The higher they climb, the harder the fall when they realize they don't actually own their golden goose. For the next 3 weeks, I watched the entire circus unfold from the sidelines. It was surreal. TechCrunch ran breathless headlines about the blockbuster merger that would reshape Silicon Valley. The Wall Street Journal quoted Richard Blackwood himself, calling it a transformative moment for cloud computing innovation. My former colleagues, people who had barely looked at me during my final weeks, were now posting giddy LinkedIn updates about the unprecedented opportunities ahead. Sarah from accounting forwarded a company-wide email about exciting changes and growth potential. Even Miguel, the night security guard, mentioned to a mutual friend that there were rumors of hiring bonuses once the deal closed. The irony was delicious. While they were all dreaming of stock options and corner offices, I was cashing unemployment checks, eating takeout on my couch, and Ironically, sleeping better than I had in years. Then, on a Thursday evening in late March, my phone buzzed. The caller ID showed an unknown number with a 650 area code. Classic Peninsula business line. I almost let it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered, "Damon, this is Richard Blackwood. We need to talk." His voice was unrecognizable. The smooth, calculated confidence, the same tone that could charm investors and bulldoze competitors, was gone. In its place was the shaky, brittle sound of a man who had just realized his empire was built on quicksand. And I wasn't about to throw him a rope. And when Nexra's audit team uncovered my patent, I could almost imagine the panic in their glass-walled conference room. The deal team probably called an emergency meeting that same hour. After all, the merger couldn't possibly proceed without clear title to the algorithm. It wasn't just a piece of technology, it was the very foundation of Pinnacle's valuation. Without my license, the billion-dollar pipeline they had promised investors was suddenly worth nothing more than sand. If I didn't grant Nexra a license, the deal was dead. Simple as that. Any acquisition would leave them owning a company that didn't actually control its core intellectual property, exposing them to immediate litigation. No board of directors would ever sign off on that kind of suicidal risk. The weekend brought a steady crescendo of chaos. The calls grew increasingly frantic. At first, lawyers. Then consultants. Then, finally, Richard himself. Saturday morning, I spotted him from my second-floor window, standing awkwardly beside his Tesla in the parking lot of my apartment complex. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. He looked like a man who'd aged 5 years in 5 days. His shoulders sagged. His hair, usually sculpted to perfection, was unruly. His tailored suit had lost its sharpness, wrinkled as though he'd slept in it. Even from a distance, I could see the hollow shadows beneath his eyes, the kind that only come from nights spent staring at ceilings, imagining everything slipping away. I watched him linger there for nearly 10 minutes, pacing the asphalt, phone clutched in his hand, before curiosity finally got the better of me. "Damon, thank God," he breathed when I stepped outside. Relief washed across his face, so raw it was almost embarrassing. "We need to resolve this situation." His voice cracked. That, more than anything, told me how dire things had become. "I'm listening," I said, folding my arms. "Name your price," he blurted out. "Stock options, cash settlement, a seat on our board of directors. Whatever you want, we'll make it work." What I wanted was something he could never give me back. Not being discarded like an afterthought after 11 years of loyalty. Not being reduced to an email in my inbox, thanking me for my service as security revoked my credentials. That ship had sailed. "Look," he continued, words tumbling out now, desperation dripping from each syllable. "I made a mistake. The layoffs were handled poorly. I should have called you personally. I should have offered you a severance package. Should have shown you the respect you deserve. But we can fix this." It was surreal, standing there in the parking lot, watching a man who had once controlled every aspect of my professional life practically beg for mercy. For years, I'd sat in conference rooms, watching Richard Blackwood hold court, dismissing people with a flick of his hand, derailing careers with a single cutting remark. Now here he was, hair disheveled, voice cracking, bargaining like a gambler trying to win back his last chips. I let him finish. Then I said calmly, "Richard, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to license my patent to whoever wants to use it. Fair market rates. Standard terms. No exclusivity. If Pinnacle wants to keep using my technology, fine, but you'll pay just like everyone else. As for the merger, that's your problem, not mine." The look on his face told me he finally understood. The leverage was gone. Whatever power he once held over me had dissolved, replaced with something entirely new. By Monday, the outcome was official. TechCrunch ran the headline I'd been expecting. Pinnacle, Nexra merger collapses amid patent dispute. When Nexra's due diligence team stumbled across my patent, I could almost picture the panic erupting in their boardroom. There must have been an emergency meeting within the hour. The entire merger hinged on one thing: clear ownership of the algorithm. Without it, Pinnacle had nothing. The algorithm wasn't just a piece of software. It was the backbone of their business model, the engine driving nearly 80% of their revenue. If I didn't grant them a license, the deal would die on the spot. Nexera would be buying a company that didn't actually own its core technology, a company exposed to immediate litigation. No sane board of directors would ever approve that acquisition. By the weekend, the pressure reached a fever pitch. My phone lit up with call after call. Lawyers, executives, consultants, all growing more frantic with every voicemail. Then, on Saturday morning, it escalated to something I hadn't expected. Richard Blackwood himself appeared at my apartment complex. From my second-floor window, I spotted him standing beside his Tesla in the parking lot, shoulders hunched, pacing like a man with the weight of the world pressing down on him. For nearly 10 minutes, I just watched. This was the same Richard Blackwood who, weeks ago, had fired me over email without a second thought. Now he looked like he had aged 5 years in 5 days. His usually immaculate hair was a mess, his designer suit rumpled, his tie askew. Most shocking of all were the heavy shadows under his eyes, evidence of nights spent sleepless, consumed by the disaster spiraling out of his control. Finally, curiosity pushed me downstairs. "Damon, thank God," he said the moment he saw me. His voice cracked with relief. "We need to resolve this situation." I said nothing, just waited. "I'm listening," I finally replied. Richard swallowed hard, his tone desperate. "Name your price. Stock options, a cash settlement, even a position on our board of directors. Whatever you want, we'll make it work." I stared at him, my silence stretching just long enough for him to squirm. What I really wanted was something he couldn't give me back. To not be discarded after 11 years of loyalty. To not have my life's work dismissed with a cold, impersonal email. That wound would never heal. That ship had sailed. "Look," Richard said quickly, his words tumbling out now. "I made a mistake. The layoffs were handled poorly. I should have called you personally. I should have offered you a severance package. I should have shown more respect for everything you built. But we can fix this." It was surreal, watching this man, who had once controlled the trajectory of my career, now standing in a parking lot practically begging for mercy. This was the same man who used to dominate boardrooms with sheer presence, who destroyed careers with a single cutting remark. Now his voice trembled. His power had evaporated. I let him speak until his desperation had fully revealed itself. Then I said calmly, "Richard, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to license my patent to whoever wants to use it. Fair market rates, standard terms, no exclusivity. If Pinnacle wants to keep using my technology, fine, but you'll pay for it like everyone else. As for the merger, that's not my problem." The words landed like a gavel hitting wood. For the first time, he understood the tables had turned. By Monday morning, the inevitable was splashed across every tech news site. TechCrunch headline: Pinnacle, Nexera merger collapses amid patent dispute. The news coverage in the days that followed was brutal. Tech blogs kept it vague, with headlines about unresolved intellectual property issues and failure to meet closing conditions. But the Wall Street Journal didn't pull any punches. Their headline read, $4.85 billion deal dies as cloud giant discovers it doesn't own key technology. Richard Blackwood even gave the Journal a quote, polished, sterile, dripping with corporate spin. While we're disappointed that certain technical issues couldn't be resolved within the merger timeline, Pinnacle remains committed to our innovative cloud solutions and our valued clients. A masterpiece of doublespeak. He made it sound like a minor hiccup, when in reality, Pinnacle stock had just nosedived 38% in after-hours trading. Nearly $684 million in shareholder value erased overnight. The same company that fired me as unnecessary was now staring down the barrel of bankruptcy, scrambling to secure a license for the very technology they had once dismissed. For me, though, the tide had turned. Within 2 months, I had 4 competing offers from the world's biggest cloud providers, each one eager to license my patent. The most compelling came from Amazon Web Services, $35 million upfront, plus 15% royalties on all future implementations. Not bad for a kid from Ohio who used to think dinner at Olive Garden was a luxury night out. Eventually, even Pinnacle had no choice but to crawl back. They paid $68 million for a non-exclusive license, plus 6 years of back pay for their unauthorized use of my technology. It was a delicious irony, watching the same executives who once discarded me now paying through the nose just to keep their lights on. And Richard Blackwood? For weeks later, he was quietly forced out. The board issued a bland press release about a strategic leadership transition, announcing that the company's CFO would be stepping in as interim CEO. Everyone in the industry knew the truth. Richard's arrogance had finally caught up with him. As for me, I had decisions to make. I could have cashed out and retired at 35, but I didn't want to just win. I wanted to build something meaningful. So I took part of my settlement money and launched a small consulting firm dedicated to protecting individual inventors from exactly the kind of corporate exploitation I had endured. I called up Dr. Harrison, my old mentor, the man who had once believed in me back when no one else did. He came out of retirement to join me as my partner, and together we founded Harrison and Reyes Patent Advisory. Our very first client was a brilliant young programmer from Detroit. She had developed a groundbreaking method for training artificial intelligence algorithms, something with the potential to reshape the entire industry. During our first meeting, I leaned across the desk and gave her the same advice Dr. Harrison once gave me. Make sure you file the paperwork. Trust me, big companies have a way of forgetting where their best ideas actually came from. That moment hit me with a wave of irony. In the end, I had learned more about business strategy from betrayal than from over a decade of loyal service. And here's what I've come to believe. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's building something better. Something they can't take from you. Something that endures. These days, I sleep soundly knowing that every line of code I write, every innovation I create belongs to me, until I decide otherwise. And when young programmers ask me for advice, I tell them exactly what Dr. Harrison told me years ago. Always have a plan B. Because corporations will forget, sooner or later, that their entire success rests on the shoulders of the people who actually build things. So if you found value in this story, go ahead and like the video, drop a comment to tell me what you think, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you'll never miss the next story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.